Very good. So welcome everybody to another of our weekly conversations on the future of work. And if you can, then please consider turning on your cameras. It's great to see everybody here. I'd like to quickly acknowledge the National Science Foundation for partially funding this effort. And of course, the organizers, Linda Boyle, John Lee, Rafaela Sadoun, Manfred Chelgi, and then Aura Chair and myself are here today. This is a recorded session, and please post your questions in the chat, and or we'll be moderating those today. So I'd like to welcome our colleague and friend, Andreas Reiner. Andreas is a professor of HCI and virtual reality at the Technische Hochschule Ingolstadt. A beautiful place that I can attest to. I visited you about a year and a couple months ago. Very pretty place. And Andreas and I have known each other for quite a long time, especially through the Automotive UI conference series, where Andreas now is one of the co-chairs of the steering committee. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you also will be running Mensch und Computer, right? Soon.
Yes, it's the German HCI conference, and this will take place this September.
Very good. So thank you very much for joining us. It's wonderful to have you. And I just wanted to get started with a few questions. And the first one I was excited about is you know, you're interested in driving and automation, but you're sort of expanding in the third dimension as well. And so you're thinking about air taxis. And also, as far as driving is concerned, you're thinking about automated buses. So there's just this broad array of things that you're involved in. So could you give us a brief introduction into how you see this vision of automation? You know, both you and me maybe having the car, but then it's broader than that. So please tell us.
Yeah, hello together, and thanks for having me here. And I think that most of you, or at least some of you that know that we are doing a lot of research in automated driving. And driving research is basically something that has developed over a long time. So remember, the first vehicles were driven 150 years ago. And all this research and this development is rather a incremental process. So it's very easy just to implement a new function, to bring it in the car, to test it, and finally to bring it to production. But nowadays, and that's why I want to talk about different forms of mobility. Nowadays, we have chances that needs also new ways of testing, of implementation, and also of thinking. So you might have heard about radical innovation or things like that. This is something that this is not just a buzzword. We really need to apply this also when we think about future mobility concepts. And I think that buses or the drones, these are really a good example, because this will, and I'm quite sure that it will be complementing our traditional vehicles, our traditional modes of transportation, but they need to be developed in a rather different way. What we have done in just one or two projects in the past years was looking at the actual fears that people have in using these technologies, and there are quite interesting results showed up. And I have brought some videos with me, and I can just quickly give you a few insights or just an impression how it looks like when we run these tests. And interestingly, before starting the videos or showing you the videos, manufacturers of these technologies, they still often either don't want to understand it or don't want to admit that this is that it's important to include the citizens, to do participatory design, to think about user-centered design already from the very beginning, because it's too late when you have developed your technology and you want to introduce it in the market and nobody accept it, or nobody trusts it and nobody uses it. Then you have lost maybe 5 to 10 years, have lost a lot of money, and also the competition on the market, of course. And that's why it's very important to do this in parallel. Developing technology and testing with the real users or the potential future users, what they think about the technology, what are the fears they have, and also in terms of interior design, exterior design, how they would like them to look like, which functions they need, which services they want. And just one example that I show you on a video, and I hope it works. Let's see. So you should see the video, and I just play it. So without sound maybe, or silent sound. So let's see, you should see a drone here showing up on the right side of the video, and it's just up to take off in a while. Play it a bit faster. So you see it's lifting and it's moving. So this was one of the scenarios that we used in our tests. And you hear, maybe you can hear it. I'm not quite sure. It's rather loud. So even if you're 50 meters away, it's very loud. And this is a problem.
Andreas, how big is it?
So this is actually a drone that it has a diameter of 4.5 meters, and it's used to carry weights up to 28 kilograms. I'll just play it a bit further so you see maybe, let's see that one. So then it lands, and we let people just walk up to the drone, and here you see the dimension. So it has a diameter of 4.5 meters. And this is something that you might know, the small remote control drones that you use for taking pictures or playing with your kids. This is something different. So it looks like impressive, it's loud, and it's not so easy that people accept it. And that's why we are doing this research together with the people, letting them perceive it. And during these tests, so maybe let's just stop this here. During these tests, we also looked at different stimuli. So for instance, we had people that were blindfolded, other people with covered ears, they could only see the drone, and a third group that has total perception, visual and auditory stimuli. And we just compared it in terms of what is accepted volume or loudness, what are accepted flying distance, and so on, because this is something that is important, beside the regulatory issues, of course, when designing the flight corridors for these future drones. And this is maybe just, so this is not the biggest one because it can only lift about 30 kilograms of load. If it comes to drones that should carry persons that are used for person transportation, then they're even bigger. And I have, let's see, I have a short, just a demo video from the city Airbus. And I can also show you, which is, see if I find it. Yeah. So this one is, this one is developed at Airbus here in Manching, so it's just around the corner. And right now we are discussing with them a project of how to bring this on the market, connected to the main train station here in Ingolstadt or connected to the airport in Munich. And just before jumping into this meeting, I had a meeting with Airbus and Airport Munich on a potential project. And also there, they have already developed a 10 million euro project, but they have forgotten that the user should play a role. So they have no work package on on user acceptance and technology acceptance and trust and getting rid of fears. And this is really something that that I wanted to basically also bring up for the later discussion. And I don't know, Andrew, it was just quite a long answer to your question. It's still, I'm not done. Can I go ahead and show also an example?
Oh yeah, go ahead, please.
From the automotive bus side? So drones, this will be definitely a technology we will see in the future, as we will see automated buses for shared autonomous mobility, because we know that there's a lot of areas where it's not possible to run a commercial bus service, but it's very easy to to deploy automated buses, small buses with 6 to 8 seats, in the future also without operator. And also here, if this technology is just there or just put there in operation, and people have no idea how it is perceiving the environment, how it is reacting, what is the algorithms, or how are the algorithms implemented and how they are actually working, how they're perceiving the environment and how they are reacting to people that may be crossing the street. They have fears, and if nobody's there to answer these questions, this is really a problem. So we need to show, to communicate to the passengers on the one side, but also to the pedestrians and all the other road users in the environment, what is going on. We have had a research project with one of the bus operators, and I have a short video with me, or actually it's a long video, but I show you only a short set out of it. And some of you might, no, this is the wrong, that one. Some of you might already have seen this at Auto UI some years back. It's from Philip and Katarina. So this is how the bus, sorry, this is how the bus is driving. So it's very slow, very comfortable. It looks very safe. There's no lateral acceleration forces. There's no need for safety belts. So it's a nice thing. Initially, when this bus was brought into operation, so it was a real field test for 1.5 years. When it was brought into operation, a lot of people, in particular the younger ones, they said, "Oh, what should I do with this? This has no value. This has no benefit for me because I can walk almost the same speed. So why I should use this?" This was basically the main reason for us to look into this deeper. What value, what benefit can we gain from this technology? And what we find out in field tests with a lot of different people and populations is, and maybe I can stop the sharing again, is that people first when they see it, they have acceptance problems, but once they have used it for the first time, and we have just asked the young people, okay, go on board, use it, try it out. After they have used it, they really found it cool, they found it useful. They say, okay, I can sit there, can have my coffee, can have a chat with my colleague, maybe working on a computer. It's not dangerous at all. It's very easy to go in and jump out, and they liked it. So it's always, when using the technology, the mind changes maybe, and this is something that is really important. Let people try out new technology and don't explain only by videos or whatever figures. The second aspect was also due to this slow speed, people had no fears of interaction. So when it comes to a video observation on the streets, which we also did for quite some time, then we saw that people, they just stepped onto the street and tried out what the bus is doing. if it is stopping or just swerving or maybe honking or not seeing the passenger at all. And this was all kind of safe because it's driving only with 10 kilometers per hour. And what we see then, so the driving speed was gradually increased then to 20, 25 kilometers per hour. Maximum driving speed, I think, is 40 of this bus, but it was never operated at that speed. When you introduce this technology, it's always clever just to step back and don't offer all the range of functionality and power at the first place, but do it gradually. Bring it first to the people, let them experience, let them play with this technology, and then increase the speed, increase the power, the volume, the loudness, whatever. And until you can do the same with interfaces. Only show a subset of all the functions and all the control instruments, and then gradually increase to the full set of functions. So this is a longer answer to your short question.
That is so impressive. Thank you so much for sharing. The videos are also so nice to demonstrate, even though I prefer to just take your advice and jump on the bus instead of only seeing the video. Maybe next time I do. So going along with this, the breadth of the interesting things that you were able to do, one thing you also explored is aesthetics and usability. And this is a nice collaboration with Linda Boyle and one of her PhD students. And I believe Clemens might have been on this too, but could you tell us more? So this is the In UX We Trust paper. Can you tell us about aesthetics and impacts of aesthetics?
Yeah, this was actually also a nice work which we did. So actually it was mainly one of the core contributions of Katharina's PhD thesis, which we did in collaboration with Linda to look also in the cultural aspects and differences, where we investigated the relationship between visual aesthetics and the perceived system quality. So if you think about a UI in a vehicle, then it typically is developed from the vehicle manufacturer. So you have an Audi UI for the Audi, and a Porsche UI for the Porsche, and the Hyundai UI for the Hyundai. And so it's inherently connected to the technology. What we looked into, or what we wanted to find out, is if this is also the case, or how it changes if you bring in your own device, thinking about Apple CarPlay or something like that, which detaches the actual UI you use in the vehicle from the vehicle itself. Typically, you might have the experience or the perception that for a high brand vehicle like a Mercedes, upper class Mercedes, you also have an interface that is developed with a lot of efforts, and it works reliable. In this study, we found out that there might be some problems in this perception, because the brand alone kind of has a so-called halo effect also on the perceived quality of the interface. So if you have a Mercedes and a brought-in device with a poor usability, then still people think it is better than it is. And if you have another vehicle, maybe a low-budget vehicle, and you use the same interface, then people rate it way worse compared to the same interface in the Mercedes. And the problem is not now on the app or on the interface that you bring in your car. The problem is that this halo effect also or was also reproduced in the actual driving function or automated function. So if you have you bring your device into the car, and the device is not working properly, then you think also that the automated function on the car has the same poor reliability, which is actually not the case, because these two are not developed together or have no connection to each other. So this was really a nice work, and also shows that, yeah, bringing in your devices and hooking up to the car is of course something that we see more and more, but we have to be dangerous also in how the end user is perceiving this.
So when car companies for the longest time resisted, brought in devices, maybe they were right. Maybe they knew what they were talking about.
Yeah, yeah. So I think I don't know any research that has looked into this before, but this could be really an argument why this actually was not allowed. So another argument is, of course, their brand and their UI and the corporate identity, but it really has an impact also on the perceived system quality, which is way more important than just the brand image, because it's a safety aspect. If you think that you are, if you think that you have maybe a very cheap, low budget Hyundai car, and you use your new iPad Pro for the interaction with navigation system, for instance, this would have an effect on how you perceive an automated function on the Hyundai car. So you trust it more, even if it has a way way worse reliability than it has. And this is actually over trusting the system, which is a safety issue, of course.
That's really interesting. So we've talked about automated cars, and we've talked about, well, we haven't really talked that much about switching tasks, right? But there's this one paper, Let Me Finish Before I Take Over, which I think is quite relevant when we start thinking about work, right? So some of these work tasks might be very engaging, and you might not wish to go back to the driving task when you need to. So there you argued for what you called attentive user interfaces. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little about that.
Yeah, this is a really a good point, and also brings the discussion more towards the title of this workshop series, Work in the Car. And of course, if we are allowed to work, and even though we are not allowed to, as we are today, we still use our smartphones, maybe our tablets to do some small tasks in the vehicle. In this work, which was actually Philip's one of Philip's thesis parts or central parts of his thesis, we looked into the difference when we interrupt a running task versus requesting a takeover at the task boundary. So if you have a micro task which only takes a few seconds, like writing a short message or responding to an email, or an appointment with yes or no, or decline or accept, then it's very easy to just postpone it by a few seconds. And what we found out in this work, it really has a huge impact on cognitive load and also situation awareness. If you postpone an upcoming task, so like you're driving in automated mode, and this can be adapted to other activities as well. If you drive in automated mode and there's an upcoming takeover request from the vehicle, you typically know a couple of seconds in advance. And if you are at the time this takeover request would show up, if you're just working on a micro task and the vehicle or the system is just postponing this takeover request until you've just accepted or finished this micro task, then there is no task switching involved. So it's way more or way less cognitively demanding compared to just interrupting every time when the system message pops up. And this is something that really could be implemented, because you always know a couple of seconds in advance, and it's way better to just postpone by 2, 3, 4 seconds than just interrupting. And we know from research also situation awareness, so getting into the situation takes up to 5 seconds. So you always have to think about this, and this might be a good idea also to to calibrate the interfaces.
Thank you, Andreas. This is kind of fascinating. I just want to follow up quickly before I take more questions from the audience about the automation level of the drones and how people respond not only to like the size and sound, but also to their either to the actual automation level or to the perceived automation level.
So actually, it's not so you cannot really call it automation level as we use it for vehicles,
right?
Because these are all prototypes, and they're not in public operation right now. So they are operating. Of course, they do some automation, but most likely they are just pre-programmed. They have not really this environmental perception. Because so there's a lot of more problems to tackle right now, based on technology, based on safety aspects, and also how to operate the drone. Is it electrical operated? Is it hydrogen powered, and so on? And if it comes to this personal or person operation or public transport, drones like these air taxis, then there's a long way to go. We know from Airbus, so they have this city Airbus, which is able to fly, but it's not automated. There's an operator on board right now. So it's just like a helicopter, more or less.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. That's really all the range from kind of a helicopter to remote control device to a device that you just send into a particular destination and kind of autonomously find its way.
The questions are basically the same than we have for automated driving. Would it be teleoperation? What is the fallback thing? Is there a need for a takeover, so to say, or do you have to have a pilot license to operate it or not? And typically the development steps are more or less similar towards level 5 automation. At the end, they should fly automated, maybe towards autonomously, without any operator on board, and the passengers or the people inside are just passengers. They don't have to need any pilot license to fly it.
So I think there's a really interesting question here relates to the fact that there are multiple people involved in shared control. Peter, would you like to ask your question?
Sure. So part of the reason I'm here is because my wife works in shared autonomous control as well. So I saw the title of the talk and was like, oh, this is super interesting. But in her work, shared means something different. It means human and AI are sharing control. Whereas in your case, you're saying, well, multiple people are sharing this autonomous vehicle. Mm-hmm. I was wondering whether the level, and you touched on this briefly with the helicopter, it has a pilot in it, whether that level of human being in the loop or not, does that play a factor in how people think about the safety and what their acceptance is for these vehicles?
Yeah, definitely. So at least now in the transition phase, when we think about full automation in the far future, people have adapted to it and they trust it because they have, as we use airplanes for quite a long time, there's never the need to go into the in the pilot control room and see what's going on there. We just use it as a bus or any other mode of transport. But when it comes to this automation, so and when we more and more also see artificial intelligence or machine learning algorithms just controlling some of the functions, there needs to be a clear communication what's going on. And this is something that we also found out. So this kind of explainable UIs or explainable displays to show what the vehicle actually see, and also to communicate what are maybe a problem and that objects are detected in the surrounding, or maybe there's a misinterpretation in some objects. These all needs to be communicated, and this is something that you might in the near future you might have just as an optional information layer that you can switch on or off or calibrate to your needs. As more technology affine people or engineers, they might know already from their daily work and they won't need this information, but the less technology addicted people, they might need this also to increase their trust in the system. You have to explain what's going on. And we have done a study also, which was published, I think it was last year on Auto AI. I don't know if, let me quickly try to find it, then I wanted to show you just one, let's see, just one picture that, that explains this a little bit. Yeah, here I have it. So I try to share this. Maybe, no.
You should be able to share.
Yeah. So you can see here two pictures of a typical road situation. And if you think here, maybe we just look here on the left image. It's a normal situation that you experience when you drive through the city on a daily basis. But if it's an automated vehicle and you see there's some pedestrians walking over the streets, there's some cars, you don't know exactly, are these parking cars, or maybe they just want to leave the parking spot. So there's some potential dangerous situations, and the question is now how the vehicle is tackling these situations, and what information do the driver want about this surrounding area. So we let people just going to the next page. We let people in this study just highlight or mark those objects they want to have further information about their future trajectories or what they are doing. And we just color coded them like a heat map to see. And in this case, this was the picture that we saw before. People wanted to have more information on this van, also on these people that are walking on the street, maybe that person. They don't need any information about buildings or static objects because they can't move. And this is really important also to show, to communicate which information do people need to feel comfortable in the specific situations. And we have used, as you can see here, different situations. But this is just a short visualization of my answer.
That's really fascinating. Thank you.
And you just to follow up on kind of the concept of shared, since you kind of showed us vehicles that are intended to be shared among multiple passengers. I could imagine a scenario in which this kind of there is some negotiation of destinations. This negotiation would be most likely kind of automated machine learning algorithm that take all the desired destinations and come up with some optimal path. Just a thought of how do we communicate these invisible decisions into users?
Yeah, this is a hard answer. So the easy way of doing it is to use kind of bus stops or stops that are scheduled on a way. But there is, of course, also the discussion coming up now to have virtual bus stops, for instance, for the buses. To more accommodate the users, and then it's really, so we had some discussion. We never have a study run on this, but it's really interesting how people would feel if from one moment to the next the route changes because another person jumps in and wanted to go to a different target. So this is something that is, yeah, it needs a clear communication. I don't have any idea right now how to best implement this. But what we also found out is that people, for instance, if you're talking about this virtual bus stop, the assumption would be, okay, they want to have the bus stop right in front of their homes or right in front of their doors. But in fact, and this was one of the results of a study that we actually did, this is in fact not the full truth. In particular, female participants, they don't want to have the stops in front of their houses because they had fears that people just follow them into their flats and their apartments. So this is something kind of also interesting results. And what we found out in this type of research is that there's a large difference between male and female participants. The females are much more, they have much more fears also using autonomous shared vehicles in the night, for example, as compared to male passengers.
Yeah, thank you. These are all kind of important questions for continuing and taking the perspectives of users into the future. I want to transition to focus on kind of perceptions of UX and trust. So maybe Chris?
Yeah, thanks. Andreas, I was quite intrigued about this analysis you've done about how brand influences sort of the way we perceive the technology and trust it, even if it's new. And I guess I can understand that if things worked for us in the past and we have good associations with it, we want to continue with it. But it sounded like that vicious cycle that you talked about, like, well, there's already a bad brand perception, and even if there's a good UX, we still don't trust it, and then there's no investment, so it doesn't improve. And if we have a brand we really trust or like, they get away with a lot of bad stuff. How can we, do you have insights on how to break sort of that vicious cycle? So do we really need to start trusting the brand first? Is this a marketing question, or is this a UX question, I guess? How can we overcome it?
Yeah, that's actually one of the hard answers to give here, because it's interconnected, of course. And the thing is, if you think about nowadays vehicles as they have built in previous times, a lot of the perception of the brand has to do with the brand image, because they have developed it for 100 years maybe. But now new player come on the market, like Tesla a couple of years ago, or whatever, Apple Car or Google Car or Uber taxis and Baidu and whatever, all the tech companies, they just start buying cars and selling cars. And we don't have any history of how they're working, and if it's actually the interface that we like, or is it actually the reliability of the technology in the car that we like, and we don't have this long-lasting experience. So it's really hard. So on the example of Tesla, we all know what's going on or what's happening. They've just built in this 14-inch or 16-inch touch screen, and everybody was screaming, and it's amazing, without thinking 1 minute about the technology in the car and if it can be used reliably, and even if the brakes work correctly. And there were no stats about it. So this is really, actually it's both. It's not a brand question alone. It's not a UX question alone. It really has a lot to do with safety and more with usability than with UX, I would say.
Thanks.
Thank you. Clemens, do you want to add to that? I think you had a question. Clemens?
Sorry, I'm more or less passively listening, and the deadline is approaching fast. I didn't really get the question. Maybe I can add something if you repeat it quickly.
No, you typed in a kind of response and a question to Chris. So I was wondering if you would like to follow up with that.
Yeah, for me,
You don't
just
have
like,
to.
I think so. The topic was that how can brands be better, right? In order to decrease this impact of subjective perception on even safety and trust. And I think better is a very broad term here, right? Because being better, well, in this regard would probably mean like being more responsible, taking more safety precautions, checking your language in advertisement, etc. Right? So I think the glamorous example here is Volvo, right? Volvo decided to skip level 3 driving because, well, we're a healthy company and we don't want to risk the health of our consumers. So we directly go to level 4, even if this takes us a few more years. Favor that. In contrast, you have like a company like Tesla saying, well, we have a level 2 vehicle, which is essentially autonomous vehicle, right? So the direct opposite of it. But what Tesla is actively generating value, is generating adoption also of automation functions that Volvo does not. So I believe it's very hard to say something is like better than the other thing exclusively, right? You always have to probably find a middle ground somewhere, right? Because if everyone skips level 3, maybe no one wants to do level 4 because they never saw the middle ground. They don't want this hard transition from manual or mostly manual driving to mostly automated driving, right? So you really have to take this differentiated point of view here. I believe this is very important, and not say Tesla is bad for everything, Volvo is very nice for everything, right?
It does speak to this interconnectedness, your point, Clemens, right? That we trust the brand, so we'll go with it, and then through the brand, we'll experience it, and through that experience, we start trusting that specific interface or specific technology, and then we stick to it. Compared to you don't really trust the brand, and then you don't want to try the new UX. So yeah, I think that's a nice refinement that you added. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is what also makes this little study pretty cool. So I wasn't too involved in it, just a little bit is in UX We Trust, because it is like a very small or rather small example of a very big issue that you know is transcends many domains and problems.
Thank you. And maybe we can conclude with taking a step back. And I think Albrecht has a question, which is bringing us back to the big picture.
I think I first would want to sort of also jump in on the brand thing. And I think this is something I think we have seen in computers. I think if you look at, I think there's this example how Apple and Dell solved the problem with keys pressing into the screen some 20 years back. Basically, Dell called the computers back. Apple provided a little cloth you put inside your computer in order that the keyboard is not pressing into the screen. And the Apple users who got the cloth were much more happy than the people from Dell who got a new screen. So I think this is sort of an interesting thing. And I think we've seen this in other areas. And at the same time, I'm wondering if sort of the new players, if the game is different. And I think what we have seen with Tesla over the last months, the company value Tesla has achieved. And I think a lot of people say, oh, it's inflated. But the interesting thing is they can afford research everybody else cannot afford, just because of their company value has been so so basically blown up. And I think this is sort of an interesting question with regard to innovation. And I think the old players, and and Andreas knows this more than I think in Germany, they talk a lot about Spaltmaß. I don't know the English word. It's basically how well your door closes. And I have done with all companies, and they're very proud that they get this to 0.2 millimeters sort of variation around the car and things like this. So I think there may be something that I would not really easily say that people don't trust the new things. And I think if you look at how people drive Tesla, about the reports, people trust it and they don't care. Because I think that may be a different game we are up to. But my question was more, I wonder for what type of mobility we design. I think when we started I think it's roughly a year ago you started a conversation, and it was basically pre-pandemic. And I think we have seen already a mobility behavior change now. We know that I think realistically, full autonomous driving will not happen within the next 10 years. So basically that will go down the road. And so the question for Andreas, how do we do that from a methodological perspective? We do user studies. We ask users what they want with mobility, but we know they will have a very different mobility need in 10, 15 years. They may work more from home. Schools may be very different. At the same time, we know that cars take 5 to 8 years to really develop if you go from scratch even more. So how do we deal with this, that we have this variable of what the user is? And is it then going sort of the Steve Jobs way, I decide what your future should be, I don't need to ask the user? And I think Tesla has a bit of that.
Yeah, this is actually a good question, and I think I'm not. So this is really a big and significant question. So I don't trust myself to really answer it. But if we look a little bit back in history of transportation, and also on how mobility was designed, then we see. So first it developed, just we built roads where we needed them, and then we had cities that were developed just for mobility. If you look into the big cities in the US, we have other cities that were developed, or if it comes more to this urbanism and larger cities, we always also thought about the third dimension. So we developed elevators to be able to build into the height. Now we see a little bit of regaining in this all dense population and building more and more roads and having more and more traffic. This is, I think, almost the last 2 generations. They were thinking a bit more also on nature, on sustainability. We have a lot of bikers everywhere, at least in touch. Chris know it, or we know it from attending Auto UI 2019. And there's also the discussion about shared lanes and shared mobility. And it's really hard to expect or to project what the future actually will be. For me, and this, I was always one of the people that saw it a bit skeptic that automated driving will be on the roads in just 5, 7, 10 years. And now we know that it will definitely be not the case. We will have manual driving for a long time. We will have this mixed traffic for a long time, and we will have a full change of mobility behavior. So most of the roads were designed for commuting, and we maybe not need all this capacity in the future. We might have vehicles that are more used for leisure activities while in the vehicle, and not using just the road for commuting from A to B. So it's really, I don't have a question. I do have a lot of questions. I don't have the ultimate answer. What will be the future of mobility? What we are designing, what we should design for.
So what is, so I think your take, I think it's obviously, I think there is no clear answer, but what was your take on what should we do from a methodology perspective? So, and I give you an extreme. I think I see also, if I look into Auto UI, we have every year a number of ethnographic papers. Should we just reject them all? Very sort of, because obviously sort of there's ethnographic work on how the future of basically autonomous driving is based on, and they do things like driving with somebody who drives now. And I think, and basically many of us have done these papers. So it's and just as an extreme, do we or what is the method to really get there?
I think it's a mix of methods. We have recently also so we typically came from the engineering perspective, and what we initially thought that might be the only way of how to do this research is it's just building prototypes and run usability studies. But we know that this is not this is not working to answer these sort of questions. A method that we have started to use is, for example, enactment, which allows people also to think about futures that are maybe futuristic or dystopic, and so coming up with new ideas that we never would have come up with in a traditional way of kind of engineering. So I would say we have also as a researchers, we have to open and use more qualitative methods also to and more creative methods to come up with new solutions. But I don't have the correct set of methods that you have to use or to apply.
This is nice. I think that's a really nice question about, the methods. One thing that also comes to mind, I don't know, Andreas, if you agree, but the separation of what people would want and how people are accomplishing that. And so understanding, your general life interests in contrast to understanding how you might be able to use current technology to accomplish those.
Of course. Yeah, I think that so during the last year, many people had a lot of time also to reflect about their current life and work-life balance and what they want to achieve in the future. So not only in terms of mobility, but general. And I think that this would open up many new and cool solutions if we make use of all these thoughts that have come up.
Well, thank you very much. This was a very engaging and exciting conversation with many different questions that, since you have such a broad repertoire of your research, it was really fun to find out about many of those, and I really enjoyed the questions that came afterwards. So I wanted to wrap up here, and I wanted to mention that next week, Helena Mentis will be joining us, and she will talk about the future of telemedicine work.